Good morning and welcome back to the Closers Inner Circle podcast with Denise Griffitts and Bengay III. And today we're talking about selling is learned, practiced, and respected. And sales is often treated like a personality trait. Either you have it, you see my little finger quotes there? Either you have it or you don't. And that assumption, in my opinion, has done more damage to the profession than almost anything else. Sales is not charm. It's not being loud, slick, or persuasive on command. It's a profession. And it's one that requires skill, discipline, preparation, and ethics. And we've talked about that before. We'll probably talk about it again. When it's treated casually, the results are casual. They're inconsistent. They're short-lived. So we're going to talk about all of that over the next 10 weeks. And we are starting this series, as I just mentioned, it's a 10-week program, by going back to that foundational truth. And with me is my co-host, Bengay III. He is the author of Closers Parts 1 and 2, and someone who has lived this belief for decades. And this idea shaped the entire arc of Ben's career, not because trends supported it, because reality did. And in this conversation, we're going to talk about what separates amateurs from professionals, why casual selling quietly undermines trust, and what Ben has seen change over the years and what has absolutely not changed. So if you're listening because you want better results this year, here's the focus to keep in mind. If you treat selling casually, the results will be casual. And that's where this conversation begins. And today, the Closers Inner Circle podcast is sponsored by Mitch Weisberg. Mind Shifting with Mitch Weisberg is all about catching those sneaky thought patterns that quietly derail your happiness and your success, and learning how to flip them into something far more useful. In his book, Mind Shifting, Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success, he shares more than 50 straightforward real-world techniques that you can actually use in the middle of your day to break out of fear, blame, and avoidance so you can show up more resourceful, more resilient, and more collaborative in your work and your life. And Mitch can be found through his Mind Shifting with Mitch website at mindshiftingwithmitch.com, and his broader online presence, including his blog, newsletter, and social media channels, are linked from his thoughts. Good morning, Ben. How are you?
I'm fine, and good morning to you. And although we're a few days past it, Happy New Year.
Did I lose you?
You did. I said Happy New Year about 30 seconds ago, and nothing.
You're kidding me. I have to start this stuff all over again?
You have to do whatever you have to do, but you got a big blank spot in there.
I know. I'll get rid of it. What we were talking about this is this first week of a new year after a really long holiday season. It was long for me. Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. I mean, after a while, you're just exhausted. And I think many of us are. And then there's this whole thing about, oh my God, I ate all that stuff. Candy, cookies, pumpkin bread, anything, what do you call that? Pumpkin spice, anything. And I'm not much of a sweet eater. In fact, I really don't like it at all. So for the last few days, I've been trying to give it away, freeze it. In some cases, just saying, I don't want this in my house, and throwing it away. And I thought, okay, we're good. We're done. We can get back to work. And then I realized that it's Mardi Gras, the 17th of February. So we're not done yet because now it's officially king cake season. So, I almost threw up when I realized that. So in the Deep South, we're not quite done.
Yeah, and where you are, especially, you're not done. As we were talking in the green room, Mardi Gras to me in Northern California is something you hear on the news once or twice. They're having a good time in New Orleans, or there was a riot in New Orleans, whatever, and that's about it. Beyond that, no sign of Mardi Gras. So I'm sort of relieved that Thanksgiving, New Year's, Christmas are behind us just for a break.
Yeah, exactly. And I was taking the stuff down from the mantle, taking all the stuff that needs for Christmas that needs to be stored. And I went, oh, geez, now I have to decorate for Mardi Gras. And I think I sat down hard on my butt in front of the fireplace and cried a little bit. It's like, no, 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 no. But I always take Mardi Gras off or Shrove, we have Lundi Gras, and then we have Tuesday, which is Fat Tuesday. And I take the day off because I have people who are coming through from other parts of the state, or they're coming from Texas, and they kind of use my house as a way station. So I always have a gumbo, and, I feed them. They'll say, "Oh, come on, go with us." No, no,
Yeah.
I'll be right here. So,
You're like Gigi and me. If they said, "Were you somewhere the lighting of the Christmas tree or whatever?" I said, "Was there a crowd there?" They say,
yeah.
"Yeah." Then we weren't there. I go to great lengths to avoid crowds and lines and excitement. I can be excited by myself at home.
Yeah. I'm the same way, and, and without fail, and they know me well, they know that I don't wanna go anywhere. "Oh, come on, Denise, we're gonna run over to New Orleans." "God bless you. I hope you make it back alive." That's all I've got to say. So, but anyway, so we're starting this we have I sat down this morning and I created 10 different episodes for us to talk about, because I think it's important to kind of start. It's a new year, start fresh. So we're going to go back to the closers part one, which we have not really dealt with. Last year we talked a lot about the closers part two, but I think it's good to go back to the foundation.
Totally agree. Um, the closers part two, I wrote longhand on legal pads um, over a few weeks, and the sales infiltration, the last chapter in it, which is the best thing I've ever written about how professional salespeople really operate. I wrote that on a legal pad nonstop, sat down and wrote it beginning to end, and I'm proudest of it. And people ask me sometimes, "Well, why don't you talk about closers part one much?" And I said, "Well, that's sort of like grammar school." And I don't mean that in a derogatory means. You got to have it. You won't do well in high school if you didn't learn something in grammar school. But the closers part two picks up where part one leaves off. But that does not mean you can skip the stuff in part one or anybody's program. You got to know the basics so you know what the game is. You don't show up at a tennis match with a softball bat because you didn't understand the game. So part one is vital. It's the foundation of modern selling, a little raucous and rough in places. Sometimes when you and I are reviewing things, I'll read something in the part one and think, "Oh, if I had that to do over again." But I found that people don't want me messing with it. That's like penciling corrections in the Bible, and they want it left alone. So I will do that. But it is, warning, the rough and rowdy uh, parts of selling the way it really is, not necessarily the way we hoped it would be or wished it was, but a vital part of thing. Before we get into the lesson, by the way, I want to say hello to Mitch Weisberg and thank him for mind shifting and for his sponsorship today. We really appreciate that, Mitch. And you do good stuff. Your reputation in the industry is excellent, and I congratulate you. So, getting back to the foundations of modern selling or selling, closers part one. You talked about it's not just charm and personality and so on. That's one of the things that I see people all the time. People, you ought to be in selling. You got the personality for selling. They may have the personality, they may not have the discipline. There are some people more suited for selling than other people, um, but you can catch up by learning the trade as the profession that it is. And there are people who are just charming as all get out, and they don't have the discipline, and they inevitably fail at selling. And I've seen thousands of those over the years. The rocket ships, that take off with all this explosive power and everything, and 30 days later, they're working at Burger King. They didn't have the discipline to learn what was necessary or the discipline to follow the rules of their particular industry or their company. There are some people I've discovered over the years are unmanageable. I don't care what you do for them or how bright they are about other things. They won't knuckle under and find out what really works in this business. If I was talking to a young person, and I frequently do, talking them in or out of selling, among the things I would talk about with them is finding something that you're interested in. There are many things that I could sell. I'm just not interested. It doesn't do anything for me. But there are thousands of things I could sell effectively. Hundreds of them I have. And when you get to a good product, a quality product or service, which is rule one in selling for me, when you get with a good product or service, you still got to learn the basics. Being friendly and charming isn't enough. Here's a personal example. I was putting my first wife, she's now departed, but I was putting her through nursing school. And I was working for my father, making very little, adjusted for inflation. It wasn't all that bad. That's what he paid everybody. But putting her through nursing school and not making a whole lot of money, I started looking in the want ads. And I started looking. I looked at the want ads one day, saw one ad that I found interesting, responded to it, and I've never looked at a want ad since, unless we were running it and I was just proof checking it. The ad said, "If you know anything about if you want to, if you know anything about marketing plans and want to make more money, dial this number." Well, I didn't know what a marketing plan was, but I wanted to make more money, so I called. Unqualified, to say the least. It took me 3 attempts to get through high school. I only lasted in college 3 weeks. It was a stellar career. And then go out trying to sell my charm to the world. And I just wasn't qualified. I soon came to find out that there was they used to have a saying in direct sales, in particular, Holiday Magic Cosmetics, and in particular also, put a mirror under their nose, and if you get vapor, they're qualified to start. They may not make it, but they're qualified to start. And in other words, recruit everybody and anybody. Well, looking back, that maybe was not the most effective way to go. But minus that, I wouldn't have been allowed in. I wasn't qualified to do anything. I was broke. I had no real sales experience. I like to talk about the lawn mowing business I owned and created, but that wasn't selling. I was in Atlanta, and in the summertime, grass grows, and if you've got a lawnmower and willing to give it a shot, they'll hire you. The only selling I did was I sold the jobs and collected the money and split it with my friends in the neighborhood, and we'd have 20, 25 people working for us at any given time in the growing season. People say, well, there's your background in selling. Not really. Hi, my name's Ben Gay. I live over on East Lake Drive, and we mow lawns. Here's the deal. We'll mow your lawn. It needs it. And when we're done, you pay us what you want. That was the script my father taught me. You pay us what you think, what you want, what you think it's worth. Maybe we get started. And they said, yeah, go ahead. And they always wound up paying us more than we would have asked for. Therefore, I could split 50-50 with the kids. So they said, well, there's your selling career. My selling career was 2 sentences. It was like when I won the city contest selling Krispy Kreme donuts. My father said, step out of the way. In the South, we have screen doors. Step out of the way where they have to sort of crack. They can see you, but they have to open their screen door just wide enough to really get a look at who you are. And when they do, hand them their Krispy Kremes and say, here are your Krispy Kreme donuts. Will 1 dozen be enough? And everybody, I'm sure there were some that said, no, thank you, but virtually everybody took at least a dozen and went and got their money to pay for it. Well, there's some more of your sales career. Well, take the two sentences in the lawn mowing business and the one sentence in the Krispy Kreme business. That's hardly a sales career. So when I joined Holiday Magic Cosmetics, they did it because they had the mirror under the nose concept. I was able to get there, walk in the office unassisted, and sit through an interview or a sales presentation. That qualified me. Pardon me. Then the good news is, uh, again, my father or somebody, and or probably somebody said, learn what the successful people there are doing. So I attached myself to my sponsor, who was doing quite well, and to two or three other people, and I began studying what they did. And then I was blessed in that my running buddy, high school friend, and first business partner, Jimmy Rucker, took to it faster than I did. So I got to, we started on the same day in the same meeting and we were partners, but he got it faster than I did. So rather quickly, I could study him and what he was doing. And 2 years later, based on sales volume, winning a sales contest, etc., I was made president of the company. In today's money, it was shortly after I got there, I contributed to it about $3.5 billion with a B dollars a year. I'm 25 years old. I'm having trouble balancing my own checkbook, but I'm running this big operation because I studied people who were already doing well in the business and assuming it was honest, and sometimes it was on the border, but before I could discern which was which, I got in the business and did what successful people do. I became trainable, which is a lot of people can't do. Now, there are people who are, have you ever met a natural in selling? Well, I've met people who take to it quicker. Jimmy Rucker's an example. He had almost exactly the same experience I had, none, but partnered with me, and we became the number one people in the company because he was a quick student and it came natural to him, but he didn't know anything on the day we joined. It's like Mark Spitz, or I think that's a swimmer's name. I'm confident that he had to go train to become a champion swimmer, but he probably took to it a little more naturally than other people. I was a camp counselor in the YMCA, and I was always I'd get these little creepy kids. I'm kidding. Little creepy kids lined up on the edge of the pool, and I'd be into my welcome to the YMCA summer camp program speech, and I'd hear splash. One of them was gone. He jumped in the pool and swam across. I hadn't gotten to I'm going to teach you how to swim today. Some get it. Some, with all of my training, sunk to the bottom, sending bubbles to the surface, and I had to go get them.
That would be me. I sink. I do not
You're a
go into
sinker?
swim. Yeah, oh yeah. I do
Well,
not get in water over my head ever
she
because
would
I
have
do
been
sink.
she would have been one of my average students. I had to
No, I would have been one of your gone students. Stick around.
some would get in the pool and they would hang on the edge. And my final thing when motivation didn't work and so on was I walked down the pool barefooted and stepped on their fingertips. And that would cause most of them to let go and start some form of swimming. But my real point is we had some Mark Spitzes in the group, potential Mark Spitzes, who just duck to water, as they say. That's fine. But they still didn't know how to swim, really, and they didn't know how to do the flip at the end, and they weren't going to win any relay races without being trained. And then there are some who, God love them, should never, and you're apparently one of them, should just not get in a swimming pool, except to
No, I
wade.
won't even let water from the shower hit my face. I seriously my father dumped me into a pool when I was very, very young and then promptly forgot that I was not swimming. I didn't know how to swim, and my mother eventually think she's at the bottom. Somebody needs to go get her. And I have not forgiven either of them to this day.
We had a place called Venetian Springs in Atlanta, and it was a pretty fancy, and I forget whether you had to belong or not, but it wasn't a country club. Anybody who wanted to go to Venetian Springs went. but it had a long Olympic-sized pool, and then next to it, uh, sort of bunched up together, an intermediate pool which you could wade around in, waist deep. Uh, you could also swim in it, but it wasn't the Olympic, 100 yards long, 8 feet deep pool. And then there was a baby pool for the little guys to splash around in, and it was square. And right next to it, also square, they looked the same, was the diving pool, the high dive and the whatever. My mother, father, and I, and my little sister Jane went there one day, and we're sitting there talking on the edge of the baby pool, watching all the little kids. She was 7 years younger than I was, splash around. And in a group like that, you lose track of people. They all sort of look alike. You're not just staring at your person the whole time. So we're there for a few minutes, and I look around, and here comes a guy holding a little girl by the hand with blue lips. She couldn't tell the difference between the baby pool and the diving pool, and she wasn't yet a swimmer. She jumped in the diving pool, and he went off the high board, and on the way back up to the surface, hit his head on my sister. Or
Oh,
he would have been like you were about to be. She would have been like you were
she
about to be.
would. Yeah.
Yeah, she was in the process of drowning. So I think of that more often than I should. It was many years ago, but that's how quick bad things can happen. As your mother noted that you were on the bottom of the pool, that's not a good sign.
No, it's not. And, I don't use the word can't ever. I will use the word won't or don't. I don't swim. I have never swimmed. I will never swim. I don't swim.
There you go. That's clear cut. I could have negotiated with you when I was camp counselor. You don't want to swim? Go sit on that bench over there. We're good. You're one less person I have to worry
Yep.
about.
And
My
I would have
life,
done it. You would have
yeah,
to give me an umbrella because I would have been burned on the way across to
my,
walk. But,
my life goal was not to get them all to swim. It was to get to 4 o'clock in the afternoon with no one dying. That was
but
my goal.
Budweiser time.
Yeah. So anyway, there are naturals in anything. There are people for whom selling comes more naturally. There are some who I don't care what you do, can't be in it, shouldn't be in it, will never succeed in it. There aren't many of those, but they do exist. And the vast majority of us are in the middle, trainable if someone will just tell us what we should really be doing. And then if we have the discipline to do it, can be very successful in the business. Um, I have a local car dealership where when I see a real winner, I send them there. And most of them aren't there anymore, but that was their starting point. And the owner of the business once said to me, "Are there any waiters or waitresses left in El Dorado County you haven't recruited to my business yet?" And I said, "Oh, that's where I spot them. There's some people who just have it. They have the charm. They have this. And therefore, if you can train them, they'll be better at this than your average person. But some aren't trainable, and some you're not good enough to train. So there's going to be some fallout here. I don't know what it is. I'm ever seeing statistics. 73% of people that go into selling don't make it. Well, the nature of selling, I've been around it a long time. The nature of selling is you can't find people for your survey. They don't know if it's 73%. They don't know if it's this or that. Um, Two of my friends, Wade Cannon and Ray Considine, both of them gone now, uh, wrote a thing one day about sales and marketing, submitted it, and the magazine wrote back and said, we need some statistics to hang this on. So Wade and Ray made up some statistics. 13% do this and 14% answer on the second call and blah, blah, blah. That was probably 50 years ago. And I see those figures and that survey quoted regularly in other people's stuff. The only thing that changes usually is the numbers. There's four numbers. The numbers by a few points, and I know what it is, the person who stole it to stick it in their article or their book. didn't want to be caught plagiarizing, so they kept the figure close to what Ray and Wade made up 50 years ago, but they then quote it. And then I'll see thrown in a Harvard study said, and I'm thinking, Harvard study? It was Wade and Ray over a drink.
I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she sends me a lot of podcast guests. In fact, I blame her because I used to just do Friday. Now I have to do Monday. And then, of course, you and I do Wednesdays. So I went from 1 day a week to 3 times a week, and I blame her, and she knows it, and I'm not shy about it. But she was telling me she's dealing with a crisis client, and I said, well, what's the problem with the client? She said she's a Harvard graduate. And I went, okay, never mind. That was the end of that conversation.
Uh, the unqualified Harvard graduates of the world would fill the Rose Bowl 10 times easily. And I'm being light on that. There's a statistic I made up just then. You can now say that the unqualified Harvard graduates could fill the Rose Bowl 10 times.
It's
Now I've got
probably true.
Yeah. Now I've got to figure out how many people are in the Rose Bowl so I can back up my made-up statistic with facts.
And you and I have talked about this before. Yes, statistics are fluid. Let's just leave it there.
Especially when you get into sales and marketing. Marketing, not quite so much because you actually do have figures, the number of people who responded and so on. When you get over into the selling field, they're just all made up because people are so different. And many people who could have been great salespeople landed in the wrong company or with the wrong product in the beginning and got off on the wrong foot and failed and blamed all of selling when it wasn't them. It wasn't that. It was their lack of discernment and figuring out what was a good one, what was a bad one, and so on. My rule about selling, and for the 100th time, but it's worth repeating, is you pick a quality product or service that's competitively priced, doesn't have to be the cheapest, and you spend your days talking to qualified people. And then there's one I found in something I wrote years ago, but I just saw it the other day again. Somebody taught me that all you had to know about selling was to cover these points. Hi, this is what I'm offering. B, here's what it will do for you, since everybody wants to know what's in it for me. Here's what it'll do for you. And 3, here's what I want you to do now. Take action. That's sort of the close element to it. And that's really it. This is a quality product that I'm offering to you. It's competitively priced. It will do the following for you. Here's what's in it for you. And here's what I want you to do next. That's the close, and that's where people they bail out in the very front. They don't make the calls to start with. They don't prospect. They don't fill their pipeline because they're afraid of rejection. And then they show the product. And then when it gets time to tell the prospect what you want them to do, there's the other high dropout percentage because fear of rejection. They would rather hear maybe instead of no. I would prefer to hear no so I can get on with my life.
You and me both.
Yeah.
And listen, it's hard when you're in that sales, wherever you are in your sales cycle. It's very difficult for a lot of people to just ask for the sale.
Yep.
That's where they just choke.
Fear of rejection.
Right.
They don't want to hear no. And they figure maybe is better because that puts off the inevitable for a few more days and they don't have to face it. I'm fond of bragging about my closing ratio over the years with real sales, not selling a book to somebody, but with talking to somebody who called to order one book and they ordered 500 before we got off the phone or off the computer. That's a sale. I count that. A seminar package, that's a sale. I count that. My closing rate in serious selling like that is 86%, has been for quite some time. Goes up or down a percentage point or two. I check it once a year now. But with 86% closing rate, that means that 14% said no. And I estimate, this is not a statistic I can prove, but I estimate I probably made 100,000 sit down, look in the eyes, giving my Bengay sales presentation uh, in an attempt to sell you something. And 14,000 have said no. And somebody, I forget who it was, J. Douglas Edwards or Tommy Hopkins or somebody of that era and ilk said, coined the phrase, some will, some won't, so what, next. And
Right.
I didn't have that figured out, but I've obviously endured it. I've heard 14,000 times, no, thank you, I'm not interested, or I can't buy it, or I'm not, or you didn't qualify me properly, or whatever. And I'm still standing here, probably have had 8 or 9 sales presentations this morning before you and I got on the podcast. So, and 2 of those, by the way, uh, in so many words said no. They think I'm going to follow up, but I'm not. I can hear no clearly. Like, no, you're not qualified. No, you don't have the money. No, the product isn't right for you, or you wouldn't. One of the ones I turned down today was a person who wanted to be a coaching client, and we talked for 10 or 15 minutes. I'd love to add a coaching client today and 4 tomorrow. But this one and I were not going to make it
You
together.
and I, we've had that conversation
Yeah.
every once in a while. If you're paying attention and you're paying attention to your gut, honestly, you're going to know that they're not a good fit, you're not a good fit, or you just flat don't like them.
Yep.
So
Because all you're
walk
doing
away.
again, you're putting off the inevitable. And if we don't get started, you won't hate me.
Right.
Get started and what I suspected happens, it doesn't work out, then I've made an enemy. I didn't do any good. You put up your money or put up some money, and it didn't do you any good, and the relationship is over. So when somebody says to them, you're a coaching client of Ben Gay, aren't you? The answer will not be favorable to me
Mhm.
if it didn't work out. And they won't probably say, no, he turned me down. He wouldn't take me. And I've had some, you and I discussed it in the last call or two. I've had some, they say, well, why won't you take me as a client? And I say, because I don't like you. But
I've
that,
had to say that too, and I
yeah,
will say it. I'm very polite about it, and I say it in my sweetest Southern voice. But if I don't like you, I don't like you, and we're not moving forward. It's rare. It's very rare, but the 1 or 2 times I have taken somebody that made my palms itch, I regretted it.
hmm yeah. And they tend, and I'm not talking down to clients. You and I are talking about selling, but
Right.
what it does besides make you an enemy, it tarnishes your reputation. And reputation, since people tend to buy from people they know, like, trust, and with whom they feel safe, a coin that a friend of mine did 50 years ago. Um, I'm the friend. Uh,
No, say it ain't so.
yeah, I don't need somebody who doesn't know, like, trust me, and feel safe with me out run around the countryside telling them their experience with me. If it isn't going to work, it isn't going to work. And I
Yeah, don't
wouldn't,
jump into it just because you need the cash or
yeah.
you've got to pay, your cat needs to go to the vet or you need to pay the mortgage. That never works. I'm telling you, don't do it.
And the ones who, them, and the ones who try and get your price down, and I don't negotiate prices. All my prices are what I call pre-haggled. If you want me to come speak to your organization, it's $20,000. That includes travel and hotel and everything. I pay all my own stuff, so we don't have to quibble over whether I had a steak or a hamburger. But it's $20,000, and then people say, "Well, that's not in our budget." I say, "Okay, well, how's the weather there?" And why are we talking about the weather? Well, it's not in your budget, so there's nothing else to discuss. They either have it or you don't have it. And those who, in the early days of coaching, and I got pushed into coaching by my wife, who said, with all the time you spend talking to people all day long who aren't going to do any business with us or have already done the business they're going to do, why don't you charge them for that? And I said, well, I enjoy it. And she said, I'm sure you do. You're a nice guy and you like talking to nice people. Charge for it. And I've told you this before. The funny thing that happened was when I put a price on it was half of them went away. They wanted to chat and have free advice. They wanted to pick my brain. I learned to say,
Yeah.
you'll
Yeah.
pick my brain right after we pick your method of payment.
Yeah. Here's my Stripe account. Go there.
Yeah. So, uh, but anyway, half went away, and the other half started experiencing much more success with the free advice I'd been giving once they had to pay for it. Something for nothing is worth nothing, as the old saying goes, and it's true. The other thing is, though, back when I would negotiate prices, and this was 30 years ago, but when I would negotiate pricing, because, like selling cars on a car lot, they come in expecting to wheel and deal. You're there to anti their wheeling and dealing and so on. But those who got a deal were always the most trouble. They didn't want to pay the price. They don't want to take the advice. You can't call them at 4 o'clock because their dog is sick. There's just trouble comes with that. And a good salesperson, a professional salesperson, learns how to sniff it out and not waste their time. If I had to make up a new statistic, I would tell you that easily half of most salespeople's time, not the real professionals, but half of the real salesperson's time is spent when they get with a customer. Half of it is spent trying to get in front of the customer and they don't. But if they get in front of a customer, half of the time is wasted because they weren't astute enough to figure out this isn't going anywhere. They're cheap, they're negative, they're whatever. I'm looking for the ones who probably should have made it on their own, but they need some help and nudging, a little guidance. Need somebody who's older, perhaps a little wiser, who's been down the road and back, and can tell you what's down the road, what's coming up if you continue to do this. Uh, a friend and I had a mutual friend. We weren't a threesome, but we both knew this person. And they said, my real friend said to me one day, I don't know what's wrong with, we'll call him Bob. I don't know what's wrong with Bob. He doesn't seem to understand he's headed for prison. I
Whoa.
said, I said, how's that? And he said, you can't do what he's doing on a regular basis until you do it to the wrong person. Then you wind up in prison. We were talking about an old friend of mine, you and I, before we got on today, Glenn Turner, Dare to Be Great, Coscott, and I'll offend some people who just think the world of Glenn. Uh, I enjoyed being around Glenn, but I had to fire him because he was a thief, a liar, cheat, and thief. And anyone who got close to him with an iota of intuition knew that was the case. And so he had a book written about him that was he paid to have it written, but it was Glenn Turner, Con Man or Saint. The answer was con man, but enough people believed saint to keep him afloat for a while. And then the house of cards all came tumbling down because um, it, because of his ethics situation. But so many people were conned by him because they didn't have that, what do you call it, spidey sense.
Spidey sense and critical thinking. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the same thing.
you only had to listen 4 or 5 minutes if he had a brain, and you knew that wasn't true. The way he got away with it was desperate people. If I had stage 4 cancer right now, and some guy knocked at the door, and for $20 I take this yellow pill and so on, I'd be more receptive to that if I thought the alternative is dying, or
Mm-hmm.
Glenn played on the alternative was poverty for the rest of your life, but I will save you from that. So it goes both ways. The salespeople, when they're picking a product or service to sell, should have their spidey sense antennas up when they get in the business and find out how it's really going. Their spidey antennas should still be up and they get out, but you get out and go try it somewhere else. If you're trainable, selling is allegedly, I'm sure somebody could prove me wrong with some neurosurgeon who only does certain types of operations, but selling is the highest paid profession on earth if you do it right, if you do it skillfully. Uh, Cary Grant, the great old actor, said the secret of acting was not to get caught at it. If that's the first time I've ever heard that. Think about it for a minute, because that's really astute. If you see Gigi was watching something within the last few days, some movie on television, Netflix or something, and I was reading, but I looked up. We were lying in bed. I looked up and said, "How long are you going to watch that? That's the worst acting I've ever seen." He was. They didn't even make direct eye contact because one of them needed to look over the shoulder of the other one to obviously read the cue cards. Their
Oh, no.
eyes, the eyes were shifting back and forth with each line, and they were counting on camera angles to save them. Uh, you got to be looking for that type of thing and as a customer. I can walk into a place, and because I like to buy from people that I know, like, trust, with whom I feel safe, if one of those elements are missing, even in the first few minutes or sometimes seconds, I'm gone. Life's too short to be screwed over by somebody who either doesn't know what they're doing, or they're obviously honest and they're dishonest, and they're obviously exaggerating, and so on. My the golden rule: I want to be treated the way I would treat somebody uh, in the same circumstances. I want to feel warm and cozy. And we talked the other day about a friend who, the reason I'm married to Gigi and live in El Dorado County, Northern California, is because of John Pearson.
Right.
And I hadn't met Gigi yet, and I had no intentions of living in El Dorado County. Uh, it's, for those of you who are now checking me on a map, it's down the hill from Lake Tahoe. John Pearson made me feel all warm, fuzzy, tingly, and I won't go through the story again, but I encouraged somebody to move up here because it was just what they wanted. Then we decided to be near them, so we're here, and life has gone on, and almost 50 years has passed, and we're still here because of one salesperson who treated me exactly like I would want to be treated, and exactly the way I would treat them when I'm operating at my best. And
And you
that,
said the last time we talked about him that you think about him daily, and
yeah,
he's gone
yep,
quite a while now.
yep, absolutely. And I use him as sort of a measurement. I sometimes will be talking to somebody and think to myself, am I living up? Would John Pearson do this? Would Pearson be treating this person this way, and so on? And I use it sort of as a uh, side rail or whatever to keep right where I ought to be, because he was a master at it. And another one I use is Jimmy Rucker, greatest salesman I ever personally worked with. He was a master. And I've told you this within the last few calls or last few podcasts, but one of the early, I didn't catch it the first time, but rather quickly I figured out why, when we, working in an opportunity meeting type setting, met new people or whatever, their kids, and we let kids, old enough to behave and sit quietly or go out in the hall and play or something, we let kids in the room. I used to wonder in the very beginning, how come the people we just met, their kids called Jimmy Rucker Uncle Jimmy? And the same people, same kids and everything called me Mr. Gay. I used to think that's a sign of respect. It's true. It's also a sign
It
of we're
is,
not
but they weren't comfortable with you.
right. Yeah, you're not Uncle Jimmy. And it's the reason Uncle Jimmy was able to outsell me and everybody else. I took the bows because I was the front man and held the meetings and was in that element a little more famous. But the truth is, he closed over half of all the sales. We closed. And the contest that I won that made me president of Holiday Magic probably should have made Jimmy uh, president of Holiday Magic. However, he didn't want it. He's a good old Southern boy, close to family. He's never moved outside of the Atlanta area and would never have moved to California. So there were other elements that figured into it. But the truth is, he was more qualified than I was as a salesperson. Uh, he was instantly trainable. He didn't know anything about it. He just studied a couple of people who were doing well, put on his Jimmy Rucker suit, and turned into a master closer, a super professional sales infiltrator. And it may not come to you that easily, but if you're listening to this, if you're trainable, if you'll listen, if you'll stay honest, if you'll keep your reputation cleaned up, and trust me, if you don't, it is very difficult to get back. I, 40 years ago, strayed over the edges a couple of times, and I didn't log it in a book somewhere, but I guarantee you that was 10 years of less than I should have been doing because I was getting my reputation back. Most people liked me and trusted me and bought from me and so on. But if you knew about the past and some of the mistakes I had made, uh, I, I wasn't your guy anymore. So keep your skirts clean, as they say, sell quality products. And I've used this phrase in talking to you before, but I'm known as a master closer. What I really am is a master opener in becoming your friend quickly, in becoming trusted quickly, in becoming liked by you quickly, and making you feel safe with me. Among the things that good salespeople do, and I do it on a regular basis, is not selling you something. There are people that have said to me, well, you could sell ice to Eskimos. Probably true. Uh, some Eskimos, I guess. But the trick is I won't, and I'm known for not doing it. You
Well,
know,
they don't need it.
yeah, if they don't need it, I won't sell it to them.
Right.
Need it or want it or whatever. I mean, there are shades of emphasis there, but if it's not right for you, is probably the best way to phrase it, I won't sell it to you. So my closing rate is probably less than 86% because I didn't even try to close and would have refused to close many sales. So
And that's as it should be. And I wrote down while you were talking, pick my brain. That kind of makes me go, bleh. It happens way too many times, but I'm just we're not really talking about this, but I want to get it out before I forget about it. I have on occasion, somebody will contact me on LinkedIn and I've heard about them. I'm a little bit familiar. So I'll say, sure, we can have a brief conversation. And instantly they say, well, I just can't afford you. Well, why are you talking to me? Yeah, and I do ask, if you can't afford me, why are you wasting my time and yours?
exactly.
But I'd like to barter. Oh my God, hang up the phone. Don't do it. So, and I wrote that down. If they want to barter or they want to basically just, pick your brain and then find out what you know and then use what you have given them, that's okay to some degree. But if they're insistent, well, I don't have the cash, but we can do some training, some trading. You and I shared this guy wanted to write a book for me. It was a $20,000 fee he wanted to charge me. I don't have a $20,000 price point on anything other than maybe a Mamma Jamma website. And I was like, what do I get out of this? I didn't ask him because the answer was already no. It wasn't just a no, it was a hell no. But I'm thinking, what is he thinking? It was just a bizarre conversation.
I was thinking about you this morning. For our listeners, you have a policy, which is excellent. Fortunately, I don't have to deal with it because of where I fall in your club, but you won't let anybody on the podcast you haven't talked to.
Nope, not
And
gonna happen.
yeah, absolutely true. I turned down a podcast today or delayed it. I've responded in such a get back to me in a few months was among the things I said. But it was somebody who supposedly knows about selling who wanted to get wanted me on their podcast. But first, we had to talk. It'd be about an hour. That's that short call. Can we do a short call? I say there's no such thing as a short call.
No, they're
You
30 minutes at the outside. I
yeah.
always schedule these things for 15. They always go to 30, but I'm happy with that. But anything beyond that, sorry, I'm moving now. Bye.
Well, this person allegedly knows about selling, but was the tone of this conversation we had to have before we were going to be on the podcast was I got to prove myself to her. And
No,
if Ben Gay has to prove to anyone in selling that I'm qualified to do a podcast, they don't know anything about selling
or podcasting.
or podcast. Yeah, well, that to a lesser degree, you're the podcast expert, but they don't have me. So I said, well, they said, we'll answer all your questions in the pre-call. And I thought, oh God, Denise would insist on this. I'm not going to do it. So I wrote back pretending like I didn't understand the real point. I said, I don't have any questions. All I need to know is give me a couple of daytime options. And they said, well, you see, we need to know if you're qualified. And if you're, well, by saying that, they just prove they're not qualified.
That's exactly right. And
So,
I have to be honest with you, I've had some very famous names, and I mean, anybody listening will know who these people are. I'll never mention them. And they'll say, well, their people will get in touch with me. So and so would like to be on your podcast. Okay, great. We need to do a quick pre-interview. Oh, he won't do that, or she won't do that. And I'll say, well, thank you, but no. Well, but I can do it for him. No, you can't. So the answer is no. You, and we're going right back to what you and I have talked about forever. I have to know you, like you, and trust you. You're not coming. I'm not going to spend an hour with you. And I had a conversation. I do my pre-calls on Tuesdays, and I had a conversation with this fascinating man. We actually wound up, and I've never done this before, Ben, but his topic is so critical that we wound up booking 4 different episodes. I've done 2 at a time, never 4. But what
wow.
he's talking about, I'm like, oh, I need to know more. And so does
It's,
my audience. But you have to talk with me first. It's not going to happen. I'm the gatekeeper.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, by the way, gatekeeper and executive assistant and so on, Marty Conley, Martha, but her nickname was Marty, was hired as my secretary at Holiday Magic, and rather quickly, uh, she sort of took over my life. She wasn't just the secretary anymore, but we didn't have the term executive assistant. And that's in talking to somebody in the last month or so, I find they said something that triggered my mind what Marty really was. She was chief of staff.
Oh, or the boss of this place,
Yeah,
whichever
well,
comes
that's the
first.
other term. Yeah,
Yeah.
I told you I was talking to Vance Powell, one of my old buddies. He was vice president in charge of the Southwest for all of our direct sales companies. And so anyway, he called me one day with an idea, and I said, "That's great. Let's do it. I'll approve it." And is it all right if I tell the others about it? We had regional vice presidents say, "Oh yeah, I want this to go." And near the end of the conversation, I said, "Well, great talking to you. I've made some notes. I'll check back with you. before I announced it. He said, "Well, can I speak to Marty?" I said, "Yeah, but I've approved it." He said, "I know, but I really want this done. Could I talk to Marty?"
Or as Dr. Napoleon Hill would tell you, write it down, Ben. So, yeah, I
If
get. Oh,
if
we are
Marty
out
didn't
of time.
approve it, it wasn't approved.
That's right. We are
And
out of time. Can you
that's
believe?
that's when chief of staff popped up. I thought, now there, that lady, I can't think of her name right now, Trump's chief of staff. She's the most powerful woman in the world and one of the most powerful men, women, anything in the world.
Susan
Because
Wiles, Wiles. I think it's Wiles.
something like that.
Yeah.
uh, because she decides what he sees, who sees him, when they see him, how much time they get, etc. She's the chief of staff, and that's what Marty really was. Side note, bonus tip: if you're running some operation, get yourself a chief of staff who looks out for you, who will tell you the absolute truth. That was another Napoleon Hill. Always have a few people around you who will tell you the absolute truth, no matter what. And with Marty, I can't tell you how many times the door would, she'd be talking to me and then she'd reach behind her and grab the door and shut it. And I think, oh God, because that's when she says, I love you. Love Marcia, who was my wife at the time. Love you all. But on this particular point, you're full of crap, and we're not doing it. Okay.
Makes
No
sense
one
to me.
ever explained it to me that way
Yeah.
before.
Did you just, tip your hat and say, yes, ma'am?
That's right.
Or, yes, ma'am, Sergeant Mother, sir. Whatever you need to say. Ben, we are out of
I
time.
was just about to say the same thing.
Yeah, this went so, I'm so glad we had this for our first conversation of the year. This has been fascinating. So, everybody, as we close today's conversation, we want to leave you with something to reflect on this week. Ask yourself this and grab a pen, a pen and a pad of paper, type whatever you want to do. Ask yourself, where have I treated selling casually? And then ask yourself, what does professionalism in my role actually look like? And it's not what it sounds like, what it looks like. And not on social media. What does it look like to you? And what does it truly require of you day to day? And then take a few minutes and write it all down. So here's another tip. Ben has shared this with me and I know it well. Create your own definition of what it means to be a professional in sales. Because when you define the standard, you give yourself something real to live up to. So everybody, thank you for spending time with us. And we will see you next Wednesday when we dive into episode 2. Like I mentioned in the beginning, this is a 10-part series. And that one is going to be the first sale is always yourself. Ben, Happy New Year. See you
Happy
next week.
Happy New Year to you. Have a wonderful day. I always enjoy them, but I really enjoyed this one, and I'll see you next week.
I'll be here. I'll talk to y'all later. Tell Gigi hi.
I shall.
Bye.